Hello and welcome to another How to Code Well web chat. My name's Peter Fisher, and in today's web chat I would like to talk about the tools that we use for web development, the stigma that can come with those tools, and also the libraries that we use for our web projects and the impacts that they have with our projects going forward. So this talk is kind of centered towards the junior developers as well as the senior developers as well. Now after that talk I'm also going to discuss some improvements that have happened to the blog, as well as some changes that are coming in to the channel as well. Now what I'm going to do is in the description down below I'm going to add two links to those two segments, the news segment and also the actual web chat itself. Some really great feedback that I had from Reddit based on the previous web chat that I did last week, which was the 5 things that every web development team should be doing in 2017, was to include some links to the time-based items in the web chat, and therefore people don't have to listen to me ramble on before they get to the part that they really want to listen to. So I'm going to do that from now on. So I am listening to the community, I am improving the videos as they go on, and hopefully they will just get better and better as this channel evolves. So let's get on to the first bit. Let's get on to the web chat. So this is using the tools and the stigma around those tools, as well as the libraries that the projects include. So this is off of the back of a Twitter rant that I did over the weekend, and I'm just going to bring that up here. Okay, and actually during the weekend it was actually my time off, but as you probably guessed, that when a web developer stops writing code, they don't stop thinking about code or web development, and so obviously I had a bit of headspace to think about various web development topics, and one was the tools that we use. So a lot of things sometimes I hear people saying, if you do X then you're not really Y. If you use a certain tool then you can't be classed as a web developer. If you use a certain tool then you can't say that you're a proper programmer, and it's always the proper programmer or the true web developer. It can be quite intimidating to junior developers, I feel, because you're basically pigeonholing people and saying that they can't be a proper web developer if they do certain things. Now let's just break that argument apart. There are certain things, in my opinion, that if people do, or certain tools that people use, that can't be classed as web development because they aren't developing bits and pieces. So for example, if you were a WordPress guy, if you did a lot of WordPress stuff, but you literally just installed WordPress using one of those one-click installers, and then you installed the plugins using the one-click plugin installation process, and that's all you did, then you haven't developed the website, you have installed the website. So in my opinion, you're not classed as a web developer if you are literally just installing it. You're not developing it, you're not improving it, you're not expanding it, you're not maintaining it perhaps. You are literally just installing it. It's when you start writing the code, in my opinion, or when you start changing the graphics, in my opinion, that you can class yourself as a developer, because you're developing it, you're creating it, it's evolving from what you're doing, from your thinking, from your thought process. You're changing and manipulating the website and the web pages to suit what you want to do. You're not just using some off-the-shelf theme and some off-the-shelf plugins, and all you're doing is filling in a bunch of web forms and pressing submit. But a lot of people start like that. A lot of people start creating websites using these online tools, such as I think Wix.com has a tool that you can create quick websites with, using their one-click installation process and their online sign-up and so forth, where you can drag and drop bits and pieces from, like images and buttons and other bits and pieces. Excuse me. But it is quite harsh to say that if you do something, if you do X, then you're not really Y, and this can get blown out of proportion, because I've heard this used when people use things like Nano instead of Vim, or they use PHP admin instead of raw MySQL console. You're not a proper programmer, you're not a proper web developer, because you're using these GUI tools to allow you to access the MySQL database, to allow you to export the tables in PHP MyAdmin instead of using MySQL dump on the console. You're not a true programmer because you're not using Vim, because you don't know the shortcut keys of Vim, and you get yourself in a tangled mess when you try and quit out of Vim. You're not a true programmer if you're not using Sublime Text and you're still using Eclipse or NetBeans or PHP Storm. Those kind of negativities. It shouldn't really matter what IDE you use. You're writing code. It shouldn't matter how you access the database. You're still running MySQL commands. It's with the MySQL though that it is slightly different, because I mean a lot of junior developers would come from the GUI interface because it's very it's like a safety net, right? Or one would think it's a safety net, because they can see the buttons, they can see the rows, they're not manipulating in its rawity. There's a lot of like fear when you get onto the command line from an early stage at least, because you could do so much damage to the system, which is true, I suppose. I would like to think, though, that senior developers or developers that have far more experience than those junior developers would show them the road that those junior developers should walk on in order to get to a better understanding of the technology. So for instance, I mean, I would like to think that when I go into a room, I would like to think that I can learn off of other people, as well as other people learning off of me. You do get some people in this industry, as well as in all industries, where it's they try and guard their secrets. It's like their personal knowledge that they want to keep, and they fear the fact that sharing that knowledge on will somehow destroy their reputation, or make them less smart than they actually are, because the other person that they're teaching is improving. They don't understand that that's actually improving the teacher as well. And there has been certainly a lot of times where I've learned off of people who are less experienced in web development than I am. And you need to be open to that. If you're a senior developer, you need to be open to the fact that when a new person comes into the team, they might have some other knowledge that you don't have, or they have a different experience that you don't have, and so you need to embrace that as well. It's not you shouldn't put the barriers up. It's not a guarded secret of web development. In fact, they can find all of the bits and pieces out from things like Stack Overflow anyway, so it's not like a big deal that you know how to do a certain thing and they don't know how to do a certain thing. All they need to do is read a couple of articles and read some documentation and some manuals and try and break a couple of things before they get to that point where you are. It just takes time. But the tools, though, can also mean not just the applications and the programs that you use, but also the libraries that you use as well for the project. So the libraries and the frameworks. So it's the reliance that you have on that, on the framework and the libraries. And the more reliance you have, the more you lean on those, the framework and the libraries, especially the libraries, the more overhead that you will need. So for example, as a junior developer, you might suddenly rush into just installing so many plugins, so many libraries to help support you in your project. But it becomes a bit of a mess when you have lots and lots of these libraries and they have lots of dependencies themselves. That becomes a maintenance overhead, and a lot of the time junior developers aren't aware of that maintenance overhead. They're not aware of the bloat that they are adding to the project. All they have to do is write a couple of composer lines and install the bits and pieces, or npm commands to install the bits and pieces, and they don't necessarily realize how much how heavyweight that some of these libraries can be. For instance, if you were to use jQuery and you used another library which did a lot of stuff that jQuery did as well, but slightly in a different manner, then you've got two huge beasts under the hood that have a lot of similar functions, but you might be using one framework in a certain way and another framework in another way, because that's all you want to need at that time of developing. You don't think that, you know, in the future there might be an issue with one of those frameworks, or, you know, a versioning issue or a security issue that you need to maintain. And the more libraries and the more frameworks that you have in your system, the more risk there is. So, I mean, as I said here, if you're using a heavyweight framework for just 5 lines of code from that heavyweight framework, then you're doing it wrong, in my opinion. A lot of the time, you can actually just write the code yourself. If you're just trying to manipulate the DOM for one single page, you don't need jQuery to do that. If you're doing it on every page, then yeah, fair enough. Okay, that's fine. But if you're just doing it for this one little small example, one little small feature, then there's no need. And it's the same with PHP. If you're using lots of libraries in Composer for lots of different things, then you can get into a bit of a versioning nightmare when one dependency requires this version of this dependency, but you've already got installed another dependency that requires a different version. That can get into quite a muddy water. So I don't want to come across saying that all libraries and all frameworks are bad, because they're not. In fact, I've used so many in my career, and they've helped me a great deal, but it's the balance you need. So you shouldn't be looking to do just build like a Frankenstein website of packages where you're not aware of all the code that you've got running. You need to develop the website. You need to have some idea and some responsibility as to the code and as to the maintenance level of that code. How extensible are those libraries? How do they fit in your future roadmap as well? How tried and tested are they? And can you write tests against them that coincide with your application as well? But, you know, the argument for using libraries and using tools is, why reinvent the wheel? Which is a great argument, and it's the argument that I use when I use libraries and frameworks as well, because I mean, take recently, for example, I installed a library to a project, and I spent a long time assessing the need for that library. I thought, initially I thought, why can't I just build this myself? And so I did. I started building it myself, but then as I was doing so, I was becoming aware of the structure of the code that I needed to create. So I quickly had a look for some Symfony bundles, because it was a Symfony project that did a similar thing. And in fact, a lot of the bundles that I found, a lot of the ones that were maintained at a high degree, they were actually doing a similar, or they were further on from where I was, but they were doing a similar thing to what I needed to do. And also I started whittling them down to things that have low dependencies on other packages, as well as how extensible they are and how adaptable they can be to my project. The worst thing is using a library and trying to crowbar it into your project, or trying to bend it and break it to the will of the project. You don't want to be in that position, because if you do that, then you're building your project based on the libraries rather than having the libraries based on your project. And you don't want to be in that situation. You certainly don't want to start hacking around with the libraries as well. If the libraries aren't what you need, then you either write your own library, or you find something else. You don't break the library to do what you want. Perhaps if the worst case scenario is you fork the library and you create your own open source project that is based off of another library that does what you want to do. And that's a good way of giving back to the community, because perhaps there'll be other people who are trying to do a similar thing that you are doing as well. Okay, so that's enough of the rant. That's enough of the talking points of the tools and so forth. So the takeaway there is just to be careful when you're using libraries and frameworks. Ensure that they fit with what you're doing, and also try and give back to the community. Try and improve someone's experiences and teach them something, and also be open to being taught yourself as well. That is such a good experience to have. If you can come away from your day feeling that you've learned something, even if it's from someone who is less experienced than you, believe you me, as soon as you have new people coming into your web development team and they can see your project from clean eyes, from a separate, different perspective, then that's when the brain juices start working and flowing, and you can share and bounce ideas off of each other. So anyway, I'm going to leave that now. That's the web chat over and done with. The next thing I want to talk about is some improvements to the blog that I've done. So let's bring that up here. I'm just going to move that up a little bit. Okay, so the first thing I did was I removed the stupid header that was at the top, which was just an image of my desk, which was a bit pointless, I thought. So that's being removed. So it's a little bit more streamlined. However, I would like to just mention that the whole thing needs to be completely updated and refreshed. But as a freelance developer, as a YouTuber, it's quite difficult to do that. I don't like that word, YouTuber. As someone who creates YouTube videos, I don't have a lot of time. I don't have a lot of time to work on my own personal projects. So this is going to happen slowly over the year. But I have done a lot of changes recently under the hood. One of the changes I've done is I've actually got these videos coming out automatically, or being published to this pages automatically. So these are all the playlists that I've got. This is the latest video that I've done, and if I was to click on to the How to Code Well section, we will get a list of all the playlists that I've got, as well as a count of all the numbers in each of all the videos within each playlist. Now I'm going to just talk about how I've done this. So Google have this great, or YouTube have this great API, and I've actually written some Python to access the API and pull out the playlists as well as the videos off of the back of that playlist. From the responses of those API requests, I'm now storing the JSON that comes off of the back of that in files, and then from that I'm iterating through all of that and creating a series of mapping files which are used for the URLs. So these actually create the pages dynamically. So for example, if I was to click into here to see the Docker tutorials, container tutorials, I can see all the videos from all of these tutorials, and as I said, there are some changes that I need to make. For example, I would like to change the order, so the 9th one, the latest one, goes at the top here. And then if I was to click into one of these tutorials, then I will get the iframe, the video, the date it was published, the number of views, as well as the description. Now the description is being pulled from YouTube as well. Now, so these pages are pages that are dynamically generated through this Python script. So whenever I publish another video, I just run the script again, and then it updates the website. Maybe in the future I will look at using the using the script to import these into the database that I'm using for the blog, rather than have it statically generated. But maybe that'll happen, maybe not, it depends. Another thing I've done is I've added a link to the Facebook page, which is just there, and and I've just tidied up a little bit of the layout. Like I said, a lot needs to happen on this, but it's all time dependent, unfortunately. Yeah, if you've got any suggestions about the blog, about the content that I do in the future, then do let me know, and I will try and schedule that as well. Talking now about the actual How to Code Well channel, because it's now getting into the second half, if you will, of February, I'm focusing on what comes next. Because I want to finish the Docker tutorials at the end of February and then move on to something else. So in the background, I've got PHP tutorials based on strings, as well as some object-oriented programming tutorials. But also I would like to focus on some beginner courses for things like HTML, JavaScript and CSS. This is a web development channel, and I haven't talked about the cornerstone of web development, which is HTML yet. So I'm not sure the format of those tutorials, nor am I sure how I'm going to go about actually publishing them. Maybe they'll go in one big hit, or maybe they'll go every day or every other day, or so forth. The idea is that I want to cover the basics of web development, because I want to talk about the advanced bits and pieces that I do throughout the day, the advanced topics of web development, the advanced tutorials and so forth. But I don't want to do that until I've actually discussed the basics of web development as well. So the channel itself is doing really well. It's we're now on 433, I think, 436 maybe subscribers, which is fantastic. And it's far more than, it's just going in a single direction, which is great. I do have a personal goal. I do want to get to about 500 by the end of this year. I had that goal in December of last year to get to 500 by the end of 2017. Maybe I should up the numbers, because I've had a recent increase of new subscribers. But with YouTube, it's not about subscribers. It's not just about subscribers, I should say. It's also about the viewing, also about the engagement as well. So the view counts and the engagements and the likes and so forth. So on that note, if you found this video helpful in any way, then do give it a thumbs up. Do share it around if you think others will find it useful. To subscribe to the channel to get the next web chats, as well as the new tutorials that are coming on in March and April time. Follow me on Twitter if you like to get some real-time web development rants. My Twitter handle is @pfwd, and also take a look at this blog as well, peterfisher.me.uk. Thanks again for watching, and I shall see you again this time next week.